The battlefield was not where a 15-year-old boy belonged, yet Cairo stood in the middle of it, trembling. The sky was a heavy gray, thick with dust and the metallic smell of fear. Spears clashed. Shields split. The shouts of warriors echoed like thunder rolling through a storm. Cairo gripped his wooden practice sword so tightly, his knuckles turned white. He wasn't there to fight. He had only followed his older brother, Aaron, the strongest warrior in their village. Everyone expected Cairo to become just like him, but Cairo knew the truth. He was afraid, terrified. When the enemy pushed forward, when one man fell beside him, when another's shield shattered, Cairo's fear broke him. He ran. He didn't look back, not even when he heard Aaron shouting his name. He just ran. By sunset, he was hiding behind the old storage barn, chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. His sword lay abandoned in the dirt. "I'm not a warrior," he whispered. "I'll never be like him." But fate has a strange way of turning cowards into legends. And Cairo's story was only beginning. That night, the warriors returned, wounded, exhausted, some carried on stretchers. But Aaron was not among them. Cairo's mother sank to her knees when the captain shook his head. Aaron had stayed behind to cover the retreat. Aaron had faced the enemy alone. Aaron had not been seen since. The village whispered. He was the strongest. If Aaron fell, what hope do we have? His little brother? That boy can barely stand without shaking. Cairo heard every word. He stood outside the warrior hall, listening to the muffled voices judging him, condemning him, calling him a coward. Inside, his father sat in silence, the silence of a man who had lost his firstborn son. Cairo felt a weight heavier than any armor settle on his shoulders. He had run away. Now Aaron was gone. A single thought carved itself into Cairo's heart. I will become strong enough to bring him back, or die trying. Not for glory, not for praise, but because courage is not born, it is built. That night, Cairo walked to the village gates carrying nothing but a small pack, his wooden sword, and a promise burning inside him. He approached the old gatekeeper, who squinted at him through the torchlight. "Where are you going, boy?" Cairo swallowed the lump in his throat. "To train." The gatekeeper studied him, then asked softly, "Why in the dark?" Cairo looked down at his trembling hands. "Because I'm ashamed to be seen." The gatekeeper did not laugh, did not mock him. Instead, he stepped aside and opened the gate. "Then go, and do not return until you walk without fear." Cairo nodded. The moon was high, cold, and silent as he stepped into the forest. He didn't know how to fight. He didn't know where Aaron was. He didn't know if he'd ever return alive. But he walked forward anyway. That was the first night of the 1,000. Cairo walked deeper into the forest until the lights of the village disappeared completely. The darkness felt alive, whispering between the trees, pressing against his skin. Every twig that snapped made him flinch. Every rustle of leaves sent fear crawling up his spine. He found a small clearing beneath an ancient twisted oak. There, with shaking hands, he drew his wooden practice sword. He tried to swing it like he had seen the warriors do. The sword slipped from his grip. He tried again. His arms were weak, his stance unstable, his breath shallow and panicked. He swung until his hands blistered. Then he fell to his knees, exhausted and trembling. "This is impossible," he whispered. But then he remembered Aaron, standing firm on the battlefield while others fled. That memory alone kept Cairo from giving up. He picked up the sword, and in the cold silence of the forest, he swung again. That night, he trained until he collapsed. On the third night, Cairo's strength finally ran out. He stumbled near a river and collapsed face first into the cold moss. When he opened his eyes, a shadow stood over him. Cairo reached for his sword, but a foot pinned it down. A deep voice said, "You swing like a frightened rabbit." Cairo froze. The man standing over him was enormous, broad-shouldered, dressed in tattered armor. His beard was wild, his eyes sharp like a hawk hunting in the dark. I'm training," Cairo stammered. The man knelt down. "No, you're pretending." His voice was low, steady, dangerously honest. "Why are you here, boy?" Cairo hesitated. Then the truth cracked out of him. "I ran from a battle. My brother didn't. Now he's gone. And I can't live with what I am." The man studied him for a long moment. Then he said the words that would define the next 1,000 nights. "Good. Only those who know their weakness can become strong." The man introduced himself as Driven, a former general who had vanished after losing everyone he led in a disastrous war. Some called him a deserter, others called him a ghost. But to Cairo, he became something else entirely, a teacher. Driven tossed Cairo a real iron sword. Its weight nearly pulled Cairo to the ground. "Lesson 1, Driven said. Strength is not in the arms. It is in the mind. Your fear is heavier than that sword." He commanded Cairo to hold the blade straight in front of him. Cairo tried. His arms shook violently. Within seconds, the sword clattered to the ground. Driven didn't scold him. He simply said, "Again." Cairo picked it up, held it, dropped it. Again, over and over, failing, trying, failing again. By sunrise, Cairo collapsed. His muscles screaming, Driven sat beside him and said quietly, "You showed up. That is more than most warriors ever do." Cairo looked at his blistered palms, and for the first time felt a spark of pride. The first week felt heroic. Cairo trained from dusk to dawn, fueled by fire, guilt, and the desperate need to change. But motivation is a fragile flame. By the 10th night, the fire was gone. His body ached. His hands were raw. His swing slowed. His breath felt like knives in his lungs. He woke up every morning wanting to quit. The forest seemed darker, the nights colder. His goal, to find Arin, felt impossibly far away. "What if I'm not meant to be a warrior?" he whispered to himself. Driven heard him. The old warrior walked over and said, "Good, now we begin." Cairo blinked. "Begin? I've been training for 10 nights." Driven shook his head. "No, you have been motivated for 10 nights. Now that motivation is gone, discipline can finally take its place." He placed a hand on Cairo's shoulder. "Every warrior feels strong when it's easy. The real ones keep going when every part of them wants to stop." And that night, Cairo trained longer than he ever had, not because he wanted to, but because he chose to. Rain pounded through the trees as Cairo swung his sword again and again, mud splashing beneath his feet. His arms were heavy as stone. His legs trembled with every step. Driven shouted through the storm, "Your enemy will not wait for perfect weather." Cairo dodged a sweeping branch, slipped, and fell face first into the mud. His sword slid across the ground. He stayed there, gasping, rain mixing with tears he refused to admit. "I can't," he cried. Driven walked over slowly. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't yell. He simply said, "No warrior has ever become one in the daylight. Strength is forged in nights like this, when your body quits, but your spirit refuses." Cairo pushed himself up slowly, not because he felt strong, but because he refused to stay down, and he picked up the sword again. Several nights later, Driven introduced a new training method. "Tonight," he said, "you fight me." Cairo froze. "With a real sword?" Driven nodded. Cairo's heart raced. He wasn't ready. He knew he wasn't ready. But Driven attacked without warning. Cairo dodged instinctively, stumbled, and swung back. Their blades clashed, sparks flashing in the moonlight. For a moment, Cairo felt alive, powerful even. Then Draven's blade slipped past Cairo's guard and sliced across his upper arm. Cairo cried out and dropped his sword. Blood trickled down his skin. He stared at it, shaking. Draven said calmly, "That is fear leaving your body." Cairo clenched his teeth, picked up the sword, and raised it again, even with pain throbbing through his arm. Draven nodded with approval. "Good. Now you know you can bleed, and still stand." As days turned into weeks, Cairo noticed something changing. He still feared the dark. He still feared battle. He still feared failing again. But something else was growing stronger than fear of fire. A slow, steady flame that flickered each night he refused to quit. One evening, after hours of sparring, Cairo sat by the campfire staring into the flames. Draven joined him silently. "You know," Draven said, "courage is not the absence of fear." Cairo looked up. "What is it then?" Draven turned the roasting stick slowly. "It's doing what you must, even while fear sits in your chest." Cairo nodded slowly. For the first time in his life, he believed he could become more than a frightened boy. He could become someone Arin would be proud of. Around the 40th night, everything collapsed at once. Cairo's body refused to move. His shoulders throbbed. His legs felt carved from stone. His strikes were slow, his footwork sloppy. He kept dropping his sword. Finally, he threw the blade aside and screamed into the night. "Why am I not getting stronger?" His voice echoed through the trees, raw, broken, desperate. He sank to his knees, fists in the dirt. "I train every day, and still I'm weak." Draven stepped behind him. "Look at your hands." Cairo lifted them. They were no longer soft. They were hardened, calloused, scarred. "Look at your stance." Cairo stood and realized he no longer shook. "Look at your eyes." He glanced at a pool of water. His eyes no longer looked like a frightened child's. They were sharper, steadier, older. Draven placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are growing every day, just not in ways you can see." Lean 12. That night, Cairo made a silent vow. He sat alone beneath the stars, hands resting on his knees, sword laid across his lap. He whispered into the darkness, "I will not return to the village until I become strong enough to protect those I love." The forest wind carried his words like a sacred oath. When he returned to the campfire, Draven looked at him as though he sensed something had shifted. "What changed?" the old warrior asked. Cairo tightened his grip on his sword. "I'm done chasing motivation." Draven nodded, eyes glinting with pride. "Then tonight," he said, "you become a real warrior." Cairo sat beside the fire, watching the flames rise and fall. From that moment on, every night would count. Every strike, every wound, every fall, every rise. The boy who ran from battle was dying. A warrior was taking his place. On the 100th night, Draven woke Cairo before dawn. "Tonight, we face the blood moon." Cairo frowned. "What does that mean?" Draven pointed toward the mountain ridge. "You will climb the ridge of echoes alone. No sword, no fire. Only your will." Cairo felt his stomach tighten. The ridge was infamous. Steep cliffs, wolves, wind so cold it cut like blades. "Why alone?" Cairo asked. Draven replied, "Because strength grows in the presence of others, but character grows in the absence of them." By nightfall, the blood moon rose. Huge, red, ominous. Cairo began the climb. The rocks tore at his hands. The icy wind whipped his skin. He slipped twice, nearly falling to his death. At one point he clung to a ledge, legs dangling over the dark abyss below. His muscles trembled. His fingers were numb. A voice in his head whispered, "Just let go. You can't do this." But another voice, newer, stronger, whispered back, "One more pull." And with every drop of strength left in him, Cairo climbed. Hours later, he reached the top. He collapsed, chest heaving, blood dripping from his palms. He had conquered the first great trial, but more were coming. At the mountain's peak, the air was eerily silent, too silent. Cairo rose to his feet and scanned the darkness. That's when he heard it, a low, rumbling growl. From the shadows emerged a massive wolf-like creature, its fur midnight black, its eyes glowing like embers, a shadow beast. Cairo froze. He had no sword, no mentor, only his shaking hands and a racing heart. The beast lunged. Cairo dove to the side, rolling across the snow. His mind screamed, "You're going to die!" The beast charged again. Cairo grabbed a broken branch from the ground and held it like a spear. The creature slammed into him. They tumbled across the mountaintop, Cairo desperately trying to stay alive. The branch snapped. Claws scraped against his arm. Cairo let out a roar, not of fear, but of defiance. He grabbed the beast's fur, pulled himself close, and struck its jaw with every ounce of strength he had. The creature fell back, dazed. Cairo staggered to his feet, chest on fire, vision spinning. He wasn't winning. He was surviving. But survival sometimes is victory. With a final adrenaline surge, he hurled a rock at the creature's skull. It collapsed. Cairo stood trembling, bleeding, freezing, busped, but alive. He whispered through chattering teeth, "I am not the same boy anymore." By sunrise, Cairo limped back down the mountain. Every step burned. His clothes were torn. His arms were scratched and bruised. But his eyes burned with new fire. Dreven stood waiting at the base, arms crossed. When he saw Cairo, he didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. The wounds told the story. The exhaustion told the story. The steady, unwavering gaze told the story. Dreven stepped forward. "Good," he said. "You have met the mountain, and you returned standing." Cairo wanted to collapse, but he refused. Draven placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You have completed only the first 100 nights." Cairo blinked. "Only the first?" Draven nodded. "The remaining 900 will be harder." Cairo looked up at the sky, breath trembling. But instead of fear, he felt excitement. He whispered, "Then let's begin." By the 200th night, Cairo no longer moved like the frightened boy he once was. His strikes were sharper, his stance stronger, his mind calmer. But Dreven wasn't done pushing him. That night, Dreven placed a heavy stone box in front of Cairo. Inside were iron cuffs and ankle weights. Cairo raised an eyebrow. "What are these?" Dreven smirked. "Your new training partners." He strapped the iron weights onto Cairo's arms and legs. Instantly, Cairo felt like his limbs were made of lead. "Run!" Draven commanded. "What? With these? Run!" Cairo sprinted, or tried to. He stumbled immediately, fell face first into the dirt, got up, tried again. He ran until his lungs screamed, until his ankles felt like fire, until sweat dripped from his chin, and then Draven said, "Now! Fight me!" Cairo's mind exploded, but he obeyed. They clashed under the moonlight, Cairo moving slowly but thinking faster, every movement purposeful, every strike deliberate, every dodge precise. He lost every round. But Draven smiled. "You are learning to use exhaustion as a weapon. Most warriors panic when tired, but you are becoming dangerous." Cairo collapsed to his knees, chest heaving. He whispered, "I can't keep going." Draven crouched beside him. That's what you said on the 10th night. And yet here you are, stronger than you have ever been. Cairo closed his eyes and smiled. Tuan 17. By the 500th night, the forest no longer frightened Cairo. He moved through it like a shadow, silent, precise, unshakable. Draven watched him from a distance, arms crossed. Tonight's task was different. Cairo fought 5 wooden dummies rigged with swinging arms, pulleys, and traps. Weapons whistled past his ear. Spiked logs swung from the trees. Hidden ropes snapped, launching spears toward his chest. Cairo dodged each one with impossible precision. In the early days, this would have killed him. But now, he slid under a swinging blade, leapt over a spiked trap, twisted around a falling log, struck cleanly at every target. For the first time, Draven smiled fully. You move like water, he said, effortless, controlled deadly. Cairo stood in the center of the clearing, chest heaving, sweat dripping, but calm. Draven stepped forward and said quietly, On the battlefield, you will no longer chase survival, you will create it. Cairo bowed, not out of weakness, but out of deep respect. He was no longer a student. He was becoming a warrior. On the 700th night, Cairo found Draven sitting alone by the river, staring into the water as if searching for memories. Tell me something, Cairo said softly. You never asked why I want to find my brother. Draven didn't look up. I already know. Cairo froze. What? Draven exhaled slowly. I was there, on the battlefield, the day your brother didn't return. The world seemed to stop. Cairo's breath caught. You saw him? Draven nodded. He fought like a storm, held off dozens while the others escaped, including me. Cairo swallowed hard. Did he die? Draven shook his head. No, he was taken, captured by the Iron Legion. Cairo's heart pounded. Alive. Arin was alive. Why didn't you tell me? Cairo demanded. Draven finally looked him in the eyes. Because you were not ready to hear it. If you had run after him as you were, you would have died before reaching their gates. Cairo trembled, not from fear, but from burning purpose. Then why tell me now? Draven stood. Because now you are ready to get him back. The 1000th night arrived like a prophecy. A storm raged across the forest. Wind tore through the trees. Thunder cracked the sky open. Draven stood in the center of the clearing, sword drawn. This is your last test, he said. If you pass, you leave this forest forever. Cairo unsheathed his blade. What must I do? Draven's eyes hardened. Defeat me! Lightning flashed, and they collided. Sparks exploded with every strike. The ground shook beneath their feet. Cairo moved with instinct, honed over years, blocking, dodging, countering. But Draven was a monster of war. He struck faster, harder, smarter. He knocked Cairo's sword from his hand. Cairo rolled, grabbed it back, and stood again, panting, blood trickling from his lip. Draven smirked. Good. The old you would have stayed down. They clashed again. Cairo spun behind him, struck his shoulder. Draven staggered. For the first time in 1000 nights, Cairo had wounded him. The mentor laughed through ragged breaths. Well done. But the battle wasn't over. Draven unleashed his full strength, a storm of metal and fury. Cairo blocked a strike that would have split a tree. His arms shook violently, his knees nearly buckled. But he didn't fall. He pushed back. He roared. He forced Draven down to one knee. The mentor looked up at him with pride burning in his eyes. You have surpassed me. Then he dropped his sword. The storm went quiet. You are ready. Cairo didn't feel victorious. He felt whole. This was no longer about fighting. It was about becoming the man he was meant to be. The storm ended. Dawn rose, soft, golden, warm. Cairo stood at the edge of the forest, cloak billowing in the morning breeze. For the first time in 1,000 nights, he was leaving the place where he had been broken and rebuilt. Draven approached him, leaning on his sword like an old staff. "Do you know why I trained you in the dark?" he asked. Cairo shook his head. Draven smiled gently. "Because the world sees strength only in the light, but true strength is forged where no one can see you." Cairo felt a tear slip down his cheek, not of sadness, of gratitude. Draven placed a hand over Cairo's heart. "You are no longer the boy who ran. You are the warrior who stayed, the man who showed up, the one who endured what others could not." Cairo straightened, his eyes focused, his voice steady. "I'm going to bring Aaron home." Draven nodded. "And you will. Because discipline is stronger than destiny." Cairo turned toward the horizon, toward the Iron Legion's territory, toward the future. He walked forward. Not fast, not dramatically, just steady, one step at a time. Because warriors are not made in a single battle. They are made in the 1,000 nights no one ever sees.